Thank you very much for joining us this morning, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, please have your seats and let's get down to the business of our agenda this morning. The premise has been set for us, Your Excellencies. What we want to do is really to focus on bankable projects. In the audience this morning, you have people who are doing business on the continent, and also those, well, you may call them the uninitiated, people who still nurse questions about how safe it is to do business on the continent and where to look. And practical questions are being asked. How do I start? Who do I talk to? Where do I put my money? And what are the dividends on my, or what will be the dividends on my investment? And so those are some of the areas that we'll be looking at this morning over the next 1 hour. But there's an elephant in the room. It's the issue of Ebola and the impact it's had so far in parts of West Africa. And we cannot start this conversation by not talking about that. President John Mahama, you, by virtue of the fact that you chair the Economic Community of West African States, this issue really falls squarely on your shoulder. You've been talking to some of your colleagues, or in fact, all of your colleagues in West Africa about this. What the World Bank is really warning at this point is a $32.6 billion hit to economies in West Africa if the disease spreads further. What's your own assessment, after having spoken to all of these leaders in West Africa, what's your own assessment of the impact of Ebola in the sub-region, and what are you prioritizing at the ECOWAS leadership level?
Maybe this question should have gone to President Museveni first. He's a veteran of Ebola, I guess.
and shortly, indeed, I'll be asking him what lessons there are to be learned across in West Africa. But I want to start with you, Mr. President.
I guess one of the things we should do is to recruit him as a general to come and lead the fight against Ebola in West Africa. But, I mean, certainly it's a very serious concern, not only, and I said this at the UNGA, not only to West Africa, but to the rest of the world, because it's a disease that knows no boundaries, and all of us are at risk as long as there are any cases of Ebola still existing in any of the countries that are affected. The international response was slow, we all realize that, but happily with my assessment, it is kicking in now. There are more logistics going in there than before. There are more, and it's a war, so let me say boots on the ground than before, because there are Cuban volunteers, there are American soldiers and others going in there. And so what we need to do is to plan and coordinate. And that's one of the things we're doing from Accra, with Accra as the logistics base, to identify where the gaps are in order that we are filling those gaps, and then also coordinate the response so that we're not duplicating what everybody else is doing.
Can we talk a bit specifically, when you talk about gaps, what gaps exist and where do you begin to plug those gaps from the ECOWAS perspective?
Initially, there were gaps in terms of even access to resources to be able to contain the Ebola disease. But then there are gaps in knowledge, there are gaps in the public health system, there are gaps in terms of the numbers of health workers available to even contain the disease. And so we need to identify where all those gaps are and make sure that optimum resources are going in there to plug those gaps. And so I think there's more coordination taking place now with the United Nations Emergency Response as the pivot. And then, of course, the CDC, WHO, US, UK, and all the other countries that are working to contain the disease are all playing their part. But certainly, this outbreak took us by surprise. I mean, there's never been an Ebola outbreak in West Africa. And so just understanding what was happening and what the disease was has been one of the major problems. People were unaware of how the disease is spread. The cultural practices in West Africa are to give a dead relative a fitting burial, to wash the body, lay it in state in a dignified manner, and give it a proper burial in a proper grave. And all these cultural practices, you know, are some of the practices that fuel the spread of Ebola, aside from the fact that it is a very mobile region where the borders are virtual in our minds. Otherwise, I mean, grandfathers and aunties live in different places across the borders, and so we just walk across any borderline. And so it created the situation in which the disease could spread. But happily, the international community is responding. ECOWAS itself, we had been leading the fight to contain it with the little resources that we had. But the rest of the world has joined in, and I'm sure that I'm a very optimistic person, and so I'm sure that with the increasing knowledge among the population and the resources that are available, we should be seeing a turnaround, soon.
Just one more issue I want to pick up with you, more of a message that the Liberian President, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, wanted you to put across to the rest of the world. And considering the audience profile, people who want to do business with the continent, I think there's an opportunity for you to talk to them and pass on that message in terms of the impact of Ebola in West Africa, but more importantly, whether or not this is the time for anybody, for any potential investor, to consider not doing business with the continent.
No, definitely not. I do believe, when I visited the 3 countries as ECOWAS chair, there were 2 things that struck me. One was the sense of isolation and ostracization of those countries. All the airlines had stopped operating. There were no aircrafts on the tarmac. I mean, it was a very eerie feeling to land in an airport, and I'd been to all those 3 countries before, and have your plane be the only plane sitting on the tarmac, and have the airport workers, lounging against their tag vehicles and all that. So that was the first thing that struck. And so, I mean, of all the presidents, they were very relieved to see me and said, look, you've broken the myth that we've been isolated. That was the first. The second was that even though pledges had started coming in and some organizations had started to respond, there is this preference to work through NGOs, non-governmental organizations and philanthropic organizations. So government that had the basic responsibility to lead the fight against the outbreak did not have enough resources to do it. And those who were giving money to help to contain the outbreak felt more confident giving it to non-governmental organizations than handing those resources to government. I think that with the advocacy we've done, that is beginning to change, because the World Bank and others are giving money directly to the government, because the government is leading the fight against the virus. They are recruiting the volunteers. They have to incentivize the health workers to be able to continue to do the risky jobs that they're doing. And so those were the 2 messages that came out. Happily, the isolation is being broken with the logistics center we've set up in Accra. It allows the US and the United Nations and the World Health Organization and all of them to have a staging post in Accra to be able to create an air bridge into the 3 affected countries. And happily, some resources are going into the hands of the government to be able to do what they have to do.
President Museveni, based on your own experience containing Ebola in Uganda, immediately, are there any lessons, are there specific action points that need to be taken by African leaders, by West African leaders, to deal with this current situation?
Well, as President Mahama said, we are veterans of defeating Ebola. It has broken out 3 times. One time in Gulu. Gulu is in northern Uganda. Another time in Budubujo, near the border with Congo. Another time in the center of the country, in Chivari district. It is deadly. It kills a big percentage of the people who get sick, although a percentage also survive Ebola. But the crucial points about Ebola is that although it is very infectious, fortunately it is not infectious by breathing. It's not like, it is not as infectious as flu, for instance. Flu is more dangerous. If it was not, it spreads faster because it goes through the air, through breathing. This one goes through only contact. Now, what you need to stop is the contact. And that's why I am not shaking any of your hand.
So that message is clear. We need to break the contact.
Just hold on.
He refused to shake all of us this morning.
contact, my medical people have not clarified for me. They say contact when somebody has already started feeling the symptoms of sickness. That's what they say. It seems even if somebody is infected but has not started exhibiting the symptoms, he may not be infectious. So I said, now, that boundary, where is it? So that's why I said no shaking of hands.
Right.
So once you deal with the issue of contact, and that's where the leaders, the crucial point there is political leadership.
Right.
It's not just a medical problem, political leadership.
So political leadership is needed right now.
When you get something like that, what I normally do, I come out within 6 hours. The Director General of Medical Services will ring me even in the night, tell me there is a big problem. The following morning, I will be on the radio. Say, stop shaking of hands, stop burying people who have died in mysterious ways, report to the health centers, health authorities. So once you deal with the contact, the customs, which Mr. Mahama is talking about, this is bathing dead bodies, and all that must stop. Once there is this problem, then the next group to protect are the medical workers themselves.
That's right. President Museveni, if you just bear with me, you've made very valid points, but I want us to move
just
on.
Hold on, let me finish that before I forget.
In a minute, sir?
Just hold on. The medical workers, that's why he's making a point about the protective gear of the medical workers. Because if you don't do that, then you are in trouble. Thank you. Sorry to...
Thank you very much, sir. President Kagame.
But to answer the question of whether you fellows you should come fear coming to Africa because of Ebola, don't fear. Once we know how to control it, it is easy to control. It is actually the easiest to control. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Museveni. President Kagame, the issue of Ebola, really, yes, of course, it's a major issue to worry about, but then also across in West Africa, there's the matter of insecurity, the chaos of militant insurgency, and you've seen a bit of that as well in your community in East Africa, the Al-Shabaab and the activity they've been involved in. In talking to this community of investors, what do you want them to have in their minds as they look to engage with you in East Africa and the rest of the continent?
Well, I think the previous leaders who spoke before us have said many things, important ones on Ebola and how we can deal with that. In the same way, we need to approach other problems it reminds us that when we are making any investments in our own countries or across regions, we need to think about systems. We build systems, how to invest in systems that will help us deal with some of these outbreaks, like Ebola. In fact, Ebola, much as it started being country-specific and then region, and with the problem growing, it became global. But now, so this is an emergency we have to deal with. Same time, it reminds us that we need to continue to build systems in the countries so that when there is such an outbreak, then systems are activated to actually deal with that. So it reminds us as to how to invest. Now, in the same way, when we are dealing with the security problems, which may have similarity with some of these emergencies we are seeing, we need again to have systems in the countries. We need to have systems across the regions countries working together so that we can easily tackle whatever problem that may threaten citizens' lives or actually become an impediment to people who want to come to our countries or to make investments there. So working together in a regional sense and building on country systems and strengthening them, I think will be very helpful. So I think the reading from outside when they are dealing with Africa or with particular countries has also got to be seen in that way, and we have to work in partnership to make sure that the approach is correct as we proceed to make the right investments in different sectors.
And as you talk about systems, with specific reference to healthcare facilities in all the countries on the continent, you have a record in terms of what you have done in Rwanda, providing national health cover for your citizens. I want us to move this conversation towards what you need. Where do you, are there still existing challenges? Is there potential for investment? What sort of investment do you think Rwanda and generally across East Africa is needed to boost the sort of healthcare system that exist?
There are different challenges, definitely, but there are also opportunities to deal with those challenges. In fact, if you look at the situation, you find between the resources my country or East Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa have, and then the challenges. Right in between, there are real opportunities and solutions. Because, for example, when you have infrastructure problems, which have become barriers to trade and Africa to communicate easily within, this is an area of investment. But there are resources also to actually deal with that. If you're talking about energy, which affects every country on our continent, this far as we know, and which also affects businesses. Now, this is an area for investment. And as we invest in energy, we are dealing with the problems, but there are resource opportunities also on our continent.
Can we unpack this? You talk first with healthcare and then we go on to energy specifics. Can you unpack all of this for us? Where are the opportunities? Where should they be looking to?
In the health sector?
Yes.
Yeah, there are many things. For example, in our case, let me talk about, say, they are related with infrastructure actually. There is training of people, first of all. Secondly, like when you have invested in information and communication technologies, we have found that these ones have actually helped in service delivery and therefore connecting the needy people with the area of services. So this is an area that people need to look at. And we have been doing that and making sure that the institutions are working, and based on these kinds of investments, we have seen growth in the capacity to be able to deliver the services needed in the area of health.
Prime Minister, again, what do you need in terms of investment in Tanzanian healthcare, the Tanzanian healthcare system, to make it more robust, to be able to deal with situations like Ebola, as we're seeing now, and future epidemics that may just come along?
Well, this is an area which is sometimes not so attractive to many investors, particularly those who are, looking at making money out of whatever they want to invest in. But it's still an essential area. People have got to look at it and see the possibilities of investing in the health services. And in the case of Tanzania, our drive is to try and see if we can get people who are ready to invest in education institutions relating to health services.
So nursing training, doctors, medical
Precisely,
school.
yeah, exactly. And thanks to the Aga Khan, because it's coming up on this one. So this is one area where we think we can very happily welcome people to look at and see whether it's possible. The other area, of course, is in the drug making. Okay? We need people who would like to invest in the production of some of these medical facilities, medicine, equipments, and things like that. Again, this is an area that some few investors have come up and they're intending to put up something in this particular field. To us, it's a relief, in terms of trying to get things that will be produced locally, and therefore provision of services in health becomes easier for us. Yeah. But the third area where we are also enticing investors to try and see if it's possible to come in is actually the building of hospitals as well. Okay. This is something very, very important. Of course, sometimes people tend to get discouraged because some countries may be having policies which are not attractive in this particular field. So I think what we need to do, and this is what we are trying to do in Tanzania, to try and see if we can look at the health sector and give it some special concessions so that people can be attracted to come in and invest in the construction of hospitals at various levels, regional, national, district level. With these kind of incentive packages, it is possible to get people. And this is what we are looking at the moment, so that we can get people to improve the services.
But also in having these conversations, there's a certain basic that is required for any investor to be able to operate in there. And I want us to move on to the issue of infrastructure, the needs of road networks. And I know that across East Africa, you are working on a railway system. Can you talk us through exactly what the idea is, what you're trying to establish here, and what the vision is? Yes, of course, Tanzania is part of the East Africa community. My elder brothers are probably more versed to tell the audience of what they are trying to do. But what we are trying to see is to see East Africa as a region, as a group, handle the issues of infrastructure as a region, in terms of railway infrastructure, ports, power, supplies for the whole community, road infrastructure, bridges, and all those related things. So within the East Africa component, we have a master plan that tends to look at some of these areas. And thanks to the wisdom of the elder brothers, because some of these projects are under the East Africa community guidance. Some of the roads that we are constructing are part of those that have actually come up from the East Africa community understanding. What has been standard and what has been started, and where are the opportunities for anyone who wants to complement what you've started as a community? Well, what I would say is, in our case, for instance, for Tanzania, we are looking at building a new railway line. It's close to about 2,000 kilometers, running from the coast of Dar es Salaam all the way through to the western part of Tanzania, joining us with the Rwanda, Burundi, DRC, etc. Okay? So that is an essential infrastructure. But we are also looking for somebody, an investor who can probably come in, trying to put up a railway line all the way from Tanga via Arusha, all the way to Lake Victoria, then joining us with Uganda. Okay, that is another possibility that we are currently looking at. But we are also having another railway line that will take us through to the western part of Tanzania, so that can join us directly with DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. So these are some of the areas. But apart from that, of course, ports. Yeah, we are very keen looking for investors to improve the ports that we have. 3 ports at the moment. The 4th one, of course, is the Bagamoyo famous port. All these 4 need improvement. And for the Bagamoyo one, it's a new port that needs to be constructed. So if there are people who are interested in these particular areas, we could sit down, give them some ideas on how best we can work together. Yeah, so the Bagamoyo port is a big one. What's in it for them? Sorry? What's in it for them? As investors putting their money in there, what advantages are in your Of course, Tanzania is, as I said, is part of the East Africa community. And as a region, we provide a good market for whoever wants to invest in this particular area. So you're talking about a combined population or market of about 140 million people in the region alone. Exactly, but you can even go further than that. East Africa is one of them, but we are also part of the SADC, in the case of Tanzania. So when you combine that market, you're talking about 500 million people.
So that's a good market for whoever wants to work within these East Africa countries.
President Museveni, ahead of oil production in 2017, your country has seen a rush of foreign investment into the power and then transport and the hospitality sectors. And that is really fueling demand for new infrastructure. Again, we're talking about roads. But for you, which sectors do you see as a priority in Uganda's development that they should be addressing their minds to?
Well, before I talk about specific sectors, business has got two kings. One king is market, the buyer, the one who buys what you produce. Because if you produce and nobody buys, you will be bankrupt. So that's one king. And we are telling you that Africa has got that king. Consumption in Africa is going up. We are 1 billion people, the whole of Africa. Our part is more than 500 million. So these are consumers. The middle class in Uganda is now 37% of the population, and it is growing. So that's one side of business. If you are a business person, you need somebody to buy from you. Secondly, the other king is the entrepreneur, the one who produces. So the consumer is there already. Now we want the second king, the entrepreneur. Then the two are linked by facilitating factors like infrastructure, roads. Roads are mainly done by the governments in our area, but there are also roads which can be done for toll roads.
So you need a private sector to get involved?
Yes. The railway, the power, that's to link the two kings, the consumer and the entrepreneur, the producer, the manufacturer or the service provider. Now, Africa, I think, will be 3 billion people in the next, not so far from now. It is the place to be in. Now, we had a problem of infrastructure, which we are dealing with now. Infrastructure is crucial for these people because with good infrastructure, you lower costs of doing business, and therefore you improve profitability. So from whichever angle you look at it, Africa is the place to be because the consuming power is there, the infrastructure is being worked on, and thirdly, we have also negotiated markets with other big markets, market access with the United States, with China, with India, with even Turkey, even with Japan. The only one we have not negotiated with the European Union. The only one we have not negotiated with are the Russians. I don't know why we have not negotiated with them. So that's why Africa is the right place to be.
And back to my initial question, what is your development priority? President Museveni, yes. So you've talked about roads and you've talked about partnerships. Where immediately do you want to see heavy investment going?
Where infrastructure is being done mainly by the government, but the private companies can also come in energy. The only problem I've seen with energy is that when the private companies come in, they use borrowed money. And that borrowed money has got high interest. And once they produce electricity, they try to recover money through high electricity prices in order to pay back the other loans. And yet I want cheap electricity for my factories to be competitive. So there is some sort of contradiction with the private sector. I'm beginning not to like them in the area of energy.
So you do want them to get involved?
No.
But the question then is, if you have an aversion for the sort of dividends or expectations they have in that sort of arrangement, then What's their motivation? What's their incentive?
To solve that issue of high electricity prices, because when we build a dam in Uganda, the price of the electricity is 3 cents per unit, a government dam.
Yes.
A hydropower dam built by the government. The price of electricity is 3 cents per unit. When it is built by the private people, because they are trying to pay the other expensive loans, which they got from banks, they go up to 11 cents per unit. And yet I want cheap electricity for my factories. But that's how I will be competitive in terms of production. So I was discussing with one clever European man. Well, there are many others, but I happened to meet that one. This man was saying that maybe you could use this aid money, because the Europeans say they are aiding us, although we are the ones who are aiding them, which is another topic. But this man was saying maybe aid money could be used to subsidize private electricity producers so that they charge low electricity prices. Because this is definitely going to make me give up private people in the electricity field. For the toll roads, I have no problem. Somebody can build a toll road, and the rich people can use it and pay. As long as I've got another smaller road for my poor people who can't pay, I have no problem with the toll road being done by the private sector. But the electricity, we welcome private capital, but there's that issue of the price at the end, which should be looked
How do you propose I can get around that hurdle with them? How are you going to go about it? Because
one idea is that one of aid money being twinned up with the private investment to build the dam, but charge low price for electricity, so that they are supported by the aid money which the Western governments have been giving. That's one idea.
Right. President Mahama, I'm going to pick up the issue of power generation and distribution in Ghana at the moment, and then we can also expand it to look at the sub-region and the needs there. But I just want to bring President Kagame in at this point, because I saw you were leaning forward and even nodding at some points to some of the submissions President Museveni was making. Was there something in particular that you wanted to say in terms of the particular situation he finds himself in, the incentive in there for the private investor, and your own commitments to providing power for domestic use as well as to drive the industry in Rwanda?
Well, energy is very important to all aspects of our economy and economic activities. So in Rwanda, it is needed. We have a huge deficit, but what we have tried to do is to tap into this at two levels. One is investments we want to make in the country based on hydro, we have gas, we have geothermal. These are the main areas we're looking at. Even solar investments we want to make to provide this electricity. That's one level. The other level is working within the region so that as in Uganda they produce electricity, we can easily buy from them, and we have also been investing in distribution networks across the region. That is East Africa. East Africa is 5 countries, but even where 2, 3 countries can make joint investments, or investments in one country will benefit another country because of the integration process we are involved in. So this is how we've been approaching it, and there are specific, indeed, projects that are there for investors to put their money as well as have their returns, while Rwandans and citizens of East Africa also benefit. So this is how it is being worked on. And I've said it is in a gas, we have methane gas that can be used to produce power. We have geothermal potential. We have hydro that where investments already have been made. And in another 1 year, 2 years, I think we shall be producing sufficient energy, not only in Rwanda, but within the region where we should be able to share, or where they are producing more in one country, they avail electricity to other countries within the region.
President Mahama, for Ghana, you've had a major challenge providing energy for the country, for domestic use, as well as for industry. Can you put things in context? What is going on? Why are you still experiencing blackouts?
It is basically the rate of growth of the economy. The economy is growing faster than we can put the energy in. But let's put it in context. Governments in Africa come to the realization that we cannot raise all the investment to put in the infrastructure that we need. And that applies to energy, it applies to transport, it applies to all the various sectors. And so we need to create the space for private sector investment to come in. And if it's in telecoms, we've done it by deregulating the sector. I remember when we started the deregulation of the telecom sector, I mean, there were so many people against it. They said, no, it's a security breach. Telecom is so important. You can't let the private sector come in. They're going to come and listen to communications and all that. I mean, today, look at what has happened in Africa. ICT has exploded. Private sector money has been pumped in to build broadband systems across the whole continent. We can do the same in all the other sectors. We can do the same in energy. In Ghana, government, the state, has been the principal provider of energy through the Volta River Authority and the Electricity Company of Ghana, and currently we have GridCo. But we can't leverage all the financing for it, and so we need to be innovative. We are registering independent power producers. One of the things we do is to give them tax incentives in order to bring the cost of building the plants down. It also depends on how long they want to amortize the credit for. The longer the amortization period, the cheaper it will be. You can also have public-private partnerships. By government investing, like we're doing, VRA is going into partnerships with independent power producers and doing PPPs. And so the part of the credit they have to amortize is much smaller than if they finance the whole project 100%. And so I think that there are many innovative measures that we can use, you know, to be able to resolve these issues. But in Ghana,
pardon me for
over the last...
If I may just ask, you've just recently signed I think it's the $500 million compact with
the United States of America.
What difference will that make to the generation and distribution of power?
What we did was we did a survey of what the most binding constraints on our growth was. And we identified that it was lack of adequate power. And so we decided to invest the next Millennium Challenge Compact, which will be our second compact with the United States, into the power sector. It's going to be a 5-year program, and the intention is that at the end of 5 years, we can come out as probably the most efficient power producer in West Africa.
There are no guarantees.
Well, the investments will happen, the know-how, there are a lot of factors that must go in there. It depends on, I was saying it comparatively, because it depends on what other people are doing in other countries. And so I say probably the most efficient producer of power in West Africa. But of course, other countries are improving their efficiency. That's why I said probably. But a lot of that is going to go into the distribution, because that's our Achilles heel. That's where we suffer a lot of revenue loss as a result of lost power and all that. And so encouraging private sector participation in electricity downstream distribution is going to be one of the key things that we're engaging in. And like President Kagame said, we in West Africa are part of what we call the West African Power Pool. And so you are able to evacuate power from where there's a surplus to other countries where there's a deficit. And our transmission grids are interconnected with each other from Nigeria to Ghana to Togo to Benin to Cote d'Ivoire to Niger. I mean, almost all the countries are interconnected. And so if you're able to produce more power than you need, then it's possible to export it and, sell it, to where there's a deficit. And so we're hoping that we should, if we get the power sector right, and indeed, Africa's development and growth is going to depend on how we resolve the issues of power. Every country in Africa is suffering as a result of inadequate power. And so I think that should be the prime area for leveraging as much private sector investment as possible. Other sectors like transport, getting the railways in place, expanding the ports, and others are also important areas that we should be looking at. Hospitality industry in East Africa, you have the safari, you have the wildlife. In West Africa, you have the rainforest, you have all kinds of attractions that can bring tourists into Africa. I think those are all important, but we shouldn't forget about agriculture, because that is one area where we can generate the biggest employment for the growing population that we're beginning to see on the continent.
I want to, again, ask that question I've asked your colleagues, question about opportunities, and again here in terms of power, diversifying the sector. What do you need? How urgently?
Well, I'll say that Africa is the next frontier for investment. I mean, if you go to Europe or America or anywhere, anything you think of investing in, somebody started investing in 800 years before you. In Africa, there are virgin areas. You think about an opportunity and you find out, why hasn't anybody thought about it? Why isn't anybody doing anything about it?
Like what?
Everything. Just think, I mean, hospitality, everything, My children on Saturday want to go out, because they are bored at home. And you won't believe that in Accra, there's no amusement park where children can go to. The only place they go is that little shopping mall, near Tetekwashi Circle. Somebody can build an amusement park. They'll be overwhelmed. And so, that's just one opportunity. There are so many. There's a demand for hotels. There's a demand for, just name it, railways, everything. And that's why President Kagame said that those challenges are opportunities. And investment will go to from areas where there's saturation to areas where there's no saturation. We have no light industry and manufacturing. China and Asia are beginning to become high-cost areas because wages and salaries are going up. It's going to be cheaper to produce textiles and leather garments and things in Africa. And so people who are interested in electronics and light manufacturing probably should be looking to Africa now to move their production there, because they can get skilled labor. In Ghana, we've invested in education. We have a fantastic human resource that people can leverage on. And the opportunities are vast, and I believe that, it pays a good rate of return, probably one of the highest rates of return in the whole world when you invest in Africa.
You've almost alluded to, but I just feel the need to ask you. So let's give you some money, President Mahama. If you had $100 million US as an investor yourself to invest in Ghana, which sectors, where would you put your money?
It is my hope that it will be multiples of $100 million. Because
let's start with 100 million.
Because it's estimated that, I can speak for my country, our deficit in terms of investment is about $1.5 billion every year. And so it's my hope that it will be multiples. But if you give me $100 million, I have said it already, I'll put $40 billion in energy to be able to provide, sufficient energy at affordable prices so that businesses can grow. If you ask me to invest some more money, I'll put it in port expansion. We have congestion in our ports because the economy is growing and there are more imports and exports coming in, but the ports are still, just the way they have been. And so port expansion is going to be one of the major things. And then transportation, opening up the roads so that goods and services can move freely across the country is going to be another area of investment. Agriculture is going to be the next area, and then manufacturing, light industry will be another area I'll put money in.
President Kagame, how will you prioritize your spending with $100 million US as an investor yourself?
Well, I got $100 million from somebody, and I invested it in IT, and laid a fiber network across the country, close to 4,000 kilometers. We now have 4G LTE working in the capital, and we will roll it out to cover the whole country, 95% by 2016. And this is serving administrative offices, serving schools, serving health centers, serving businesses. So this is how I would prioritize if it was just $100 million. But as has been said, maybe we expect more. So there are many priorities, from ICT to agro-business to we have seen in Rwanda, tourism industry is growing very fast. So hospitality is one area that, as President Mahama has said, that would absorb this kind of money. And so there's mining that is growing in Rwanda. That we, for example, if you look at coltan, we have good quantities of coltan and high quality of it. So mining has been very interesting, and we have also designed it in a certain way that it benefits Rwandans and provides the kinds of employment that is required. These are areas that are ready to absorb money that comes in, but if there's money in my hands, I have told you where I would put it.
For the areas that you're looking at, and for you, the IT sector as well as financial services, you have said is pivotal to the growth of the Rwandan economy. But then there are questions about the relevant skills, the skilled labor you need to drive that economy. So in terms of investment in there, what interventions are you making? What investments are you making to ensure that your human resource has the requisite skills to drive the economy according to the vision that you have for Rwanda?
Absolutely. It's not just investing in IT or infrastructure.
It's about people.
We also invest in the people. This is what we, and if you look at, let me give you an example, our own national budget, about 15% of it goes into education and has been increasing. So that is prioritizing investment in human capital, right from primary schools to secondary schools to universities and vocational and technical training institutions, and making sure that all that is being focused on is also what makes the people that are being trained available on the labor market. We have been focused on that. So it's infrastructure, it's human capital, and then the overall governance framework in which all these activities take place that we have seen have stabilized our economy and has enabled it to keep growing.
Are there opportunities for partnerships to work with any organizations that can help you drive that agenda, opportunities?
Partnerships have been very key in this. In fact, as I was thinking about it when President Museveni was talking about energy and how it is becoming expensive, one way of managing that problem is definitely partnerships, and partnerships cut across sectors. So even in the investing in human capital and creating a wider skills base in our country, we've seen that governments, private sector, we have found philanthropists, each chipping in and together, it has really made everything cost effective. And we have partnered with renowned academic institutions. For example, we have the university in the United States, Kagame, that is known for its sciences and engineering and IT capabilities, has set up shop in Rwanda, and around it we are seeing companies, IT companies also coming in so that we can leverage these investments in human capital as well as investments in key other areas, even of infrastructure, working together to be able to move forward.
And Prime Minister Penda, Tanzania is also looking to harness the potential of oil and gas at the moment. You have major plans for this sector, but again, there's a question about skilled capacity of Tanzanians to work in the sector. So what is the plan? What sort of investments are you looking to make in terms of building capacity to be able to drive the sector? And over here, I think one is actually to talk about the local content laws of Tanzania and how that is relevant to prospective investors.
Of course, capacity building in Tanzania, in the case of the gas discoveries that have been made, has become now a very important aspect now for the nation. You see, the only unfortunate thing about these discoveries is that at times you are taken sort of by surprise, because you get discoveries and then you are caught unprepared. But better late than never. So what we've done is to try and put machinery which we can now look upon for purpose of training, you know, our university students in the areas of gas, oil. Of course, we learned from Uganda on preparing yourself when you start getting sort of indications that there could be discoveries of this nature. So higher learning institutions, vocational training schools are now the centers for skills development in this particular field. And actually, in the case of Tanzania, because most of the gas that has been discovered is centered in the southern part of Tanzania, Mtwara, Lindi. So what I've done is to turn the vocational training center in Mtwara to be now the center for preparing our young Tanzanians, you know, so that they can acquire the relevant skills that will enable them to work within the gas industry. But of course, apart from that, of course, now we are taking a lot of our students now abroad as well, particularly to countries where they've been, you know, in this industry for some time. Europe, Algeria, some other countries. And thanks to the governments, because they've been ready to receive our young people and girls, you know, boys and girls for that particular area. So I think, as you correctly say, this is something that we have to take aboard. Otherwise, we may miss a lot of necessary things that are needed.
So say in the next 5 to 10 years, what is your expectation? Yeah,
it's about 10 years all the same. So this is why we are now ready, sort of taking the necessary actions now, because we know for sure most of the gas that have been discovered in the high seas is certainly not less than 10 years before you can actually start using that gas. But of course, we do have gas in the hinterland as well at the moment. But of course, compared to the one that is in the high seas, it's only a small component. It's only about 80 TCF. The remaining out of the 50.2 almost is right in the high seas. But still, we need to prepare our young, you know, Tanzanians now to be able to acquire the relevant skills at this particular time now.
Are you able to talk about the specific skills you're looking to build them up on for the sector?
Of course, there's a lot of things that we need geologists in this particular field. We need also people who are economists, but economists versed with the industry itself, you see. Apart from that, of course, we get a lot of other challenges when it comes to contracts as well. So lawyers also are now being tuned so that you don't just learn contract law. You learn contract law, but you have to know the industry that is ahead of you. So the law that you study must also lead you into proper making contracts that are relevant and therefore serving the people of your country more effectively. So it's a combination of a lot of things together. But what is crucial is to prepare these young Tanzanians so that they can now become the bosses, you know, the authorities over the whole gas industry rather than leaving it to the people from outside alone.
President Museveni, are you able to provide us with an update, as briefly as you can, on the oil refinery project that you're working on in Uganda, and what impact you're expecting this will have on investment in your country?
Yeah, but before I do that, what these gentlemen and ladies should know is that the African economies have been growing at high rates, 6%, 7%, some of them 9%, some of them even 10%, in spite of the bottlenecks, in spite of lack of electricity or inadequate electricity, in spite of poor road transport. These economies have been growing at very high rates. So you can imagine what will happen if we solve the bottlenecks as we are doing now. I thought I should mention that. Now, your little $100 million, which you are talking about,
For a start.
is just a joke, because the demands are so much that little $100 million of yours, it may help me to build some more, because now I have a problem of producing a lot of maize, which I export unprocessed. I have a lot of fruits, which are not processed. I have a lot of agro-processing. We just consume that little
Not even enough.
$100 million of yours. But coming to the other question of the refinery, yes, we have agreed with the oil companies, because the oil companies were trying to lecture me that we did not need an oil refinery. Now, I happened to visit Iran. Iran is a country which is not popular here. But me, I go to all those places. I come to England. From there, I go to other places also. Now, when I went to Iran, I asked the president there, I said, President, you produce oil. Do you have refineries here? He told me, and this was the other one, the one you didn't like most here in the West. the former one, the one who was there before. Ahmadinejad. He said, we have 9 oil refineries and we are building another 7. Now, here I was being lectured that I should not have even 1. So, but eventually, it was resolved. And they thought that I didn't know much about economics. Because the problem we have in Uganda is that we are landlocked. So when you bring oil from outside, my neighbors who are Muslims and Christians and so on, they knock off some money for transporting oil through their territory. So what was going to happen if we did not have an oil refinery would be that our crude would pay tax, transit tax, going out, and the refined products would pay transit tax coming in. So I said, look here. Even my late old mother knew some economics. To see that this is not correct. So we have now agreed on the oil refinery. We have also agreed on the crude that should go in the pipeline. So I think we are moving very well now. We are now very friendly with the oil companies. We have also agreed on the gas. We shall never flare our gas. Gas is not for flaring. Gas is for producing power. Gas is for helping us to process our iron ore into steel. So we have agreed on all those points which had made oil a curse in some other situations. This oil of Uganda will not be a curse. It is a blessing.
I'm going to have to wrap up very shortly because we are very much pressed for time. But President Mahama, again, challenges of the Ghanaian economy. You are currently in talks with the International Monetary Fund. Let's cut to the chase. What do you want from the IMF? What are your expectations? What will be the implications? What should investors be thinking about as they observe these conversations, this discussion with the IMF proceed?
I think that two have evolved. I mean, Ghana is not the kind of country it was when we first went to the IMF in the 80s. And I think the IMF is also not the same organization it used to be. It's President Kaunda who said the IMF was like a madman, and whether you had malaria or a broken leg, they gave you quinine. I guess that they've come a long way since then. And so we're looking to build a partnership that restores macroeconomic stability for us. That's key because private investment, wants to see that the macroeconomic environment is predictable and stable. So that's the first thing we're looking to do. But we're also looking to transform the structure of our economy to make it more robust so that we don't have to have the cyclical booms and busts depending on what happens to international commodities on the world market. The current instability we're going through is partly because of the collapse of cocoa prices and gold prices, and those are our key exports. And so we suffered a loss of revenue of about $1.5 billion, in a space of about 1.5 years. And for an economy like ours, that is significant revenue. And so creating more pillars, on which our economy can stand is one of the things we're looking at, both in terms of opening up new sectors like the oil and gas sector. We're giving out more exploration licenses. And those are sectors better left to the private sector because they can leverage the investment to put in there. And so we're doing that. Energy and power, both the state and private sector are creating an environment where we all can invest. And of course, one of the major game changers for us is bringing onshore our own natural gas from the Jubilee field and the other fields that we've discovered. We finished the processing plant, and we're going through the process of tying it in to the FPSO in the Jubilee field. That should bring some 120 million standard cubic feet of gas for power generation, can produce about some 500 megawatts of power. And it's critical for us because of the fluctuation in the operation of the West African gas pipeline. We had a lot of excitement when the pipeline was built, hoping that the abundance of Nigerian gas would flow through the pipeline to help all the 4 countries that were signed onto the pipeline to be able to generate. But the volumes have been very disappointing. And so bringing on our own gas would ensure some more energy security for us.
As shortly we'll be breaking into the plenary sessions, and some of your delegates and business leaders will be talking about the opportunities that exist. A minute for all of you in wrapping up, basically summaries. What do you want them to bear in mind as they go into that plenary session? And as you return to your countries, what do you want to go away from here with it? Again, I'll start with you, President Kagame.
Well, I very briefly say to the investors here in this room that invest in Rwanda, in East Africa, your money will be safe, you will have high returns, and the countries and our citizens will benefit, and we will develop together. So everything is there, already areas to invest, the framework that is, provides conducive opportunities, and you are most welcome.
Well, I'll just say that the taste of the pudding is in the eating. And why don't you take a look? Why don't you come to Africa and take a look? I mean, there's so many opportunities opening up. And just to say that Africa is not the same continent that people perceived it to be. It's a continent that is taking its place in the world. I mean, there are more elections taking place, open, and vibrant media landscapes, respect for the rule of law, human rights. And I think that a lot of the growth that we're seeing in Africa is a result of the democratic dividend that is beginning to pay off in all the countries we have. It's a continent that is made of 54 countries, and so often when you ask me if I know your friend in Kenya, I probably wouldn't know him because it's thousands of kilometers away from Ghana. But certainly, there's something good happening in Africa, and I think that, you know, investors all over the world must come and take a look.
President Museveni, a minute.
Come and invest in agro-processing. If you don't want agro-processing in Uganda, that is, or in any other part of Africa, but I'm talking about Uganda. Agro-processing for my maize, I have a problem there. My fruits, my other foodstuffs, then invest in minerals, huge mineral potential, iron ore, nickel, adding value to them, apart from oil and gas. Invest in infrastructure, like some of the roads and the power, if we can solve the problem of price of electricity. In services, everything is there. And the cost of production in Uganda are going down because we are dealing with the infrastructure. So profitability for companies will definitely go up. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Mizengo Penda.
Well, for Tanzania, of course, as part of East Africa, there are a lot of things that we share. But certainly one area that I would seriously urge the investors to look at seriously and say the possibilities is in the agriculture. And to me, it's agri-processing business. And the reasons are obvious. You see, we are leading people who are still dependent on land and agriculture for their livelihood, but also development. So to me, that would be crucial and probably number one. But as my elder brothers have said, agriculture cannot flourish if you don't have power. So we need also power, and good enough we have gas opportunities, we have coal opportunities in Tanzania, geothermal opportunities in Tanzania. So it's an area that we can welcome anybody to come and see what we can do. And final, of course, is the infrastructure generally. Railways, roads, ports. We have quite a big portfolio in this particular area where we can also welcome colleagues to come and see the possibilities. Right. So, welcome to Tanzania, peaceful country, full of attractions in tourism as well.
And beautiful shorelines.
And beautiful shorelines.
I'm going to have to pick up from here. So basically, your job is cut out. Many thanks. You've been a wonderful audience. Our panel has been the Prime Minister of Tanzania, Mizengo Penda, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni of Uganda, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama of the Republic of Ghana, and His Excellency Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda. Many thanks for being a part of this conversation, ladies and gentlemen.